Now we're going to look at how to fill out the HOA or the addendum for property subject to mandatory HOA. This is not for use with condos. Again, make sure not to use this with condos. That's a different one they have for condo stuff. Now, if you're doing this form, there's two big parts. The first part, you can see part A or the big top section. This is to switch over and get a current copy of all the restrictions and such and a resale certificate. And the rest is who's paying for it. So those are the two big parts between 1 and 2. Before we get too far, this is Andrew Morin. I'm a real estate trainer and broker. If you're looking for any great videos, please like and subscribe. We'd love to have you join our channel, become part of the family. We're going to keep offering good information to help agents know when they do their next steps of how to fill out contracts and do different things. A lot of different training to help you out. We're going to jump right in. First, you're going to put in the address of the property and then the subdivision information and their phone number. Not just the name of the HOA, their phone number where people can reach out, especially the title company. It's important if they end up ordering or getting clarification, they need the phone number. So again, A1 is what most people charge, most people click. Within so many days after the effective date of the contract, seller to obtain, pay for, and deliver the subdivision information to the buyer. If seller delivers the subdivision information, buyer may terminate the contract within 3 days after the buyer receives information or prior to closing, which occurs first, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. If buyer does not receive the subdivision information, buyer as buyer's sole remedy may terminate the contract anytime prior to closing of the earnest money. So you got to make sure you meet this date. Okay. So it's saying once they get it, this, of course, if they read the information, for a good example is I had a client, they're a military husband and spouse, they're retiring. They had 2 German Shepherd dogs that were their service dogs. They were in official service, they were emotional support and service. They're being trained to be their service dogs. One of them had seizures from the military. So they were training these dogs to take care of them. So the HOA, we were helping them get a home. The HOA they're moving in doesn't allow aggressive breed dogs. That's considered an aggressive breed dog. So once they got the HOA docs, they were going to cancel the contract. And they could have done that, and they would have had to return their earnest money. But because of, we talked to the HOA, they said because of that situation, they have no issue allowing those type of pets to help the military veterans. So that worked out fine. But you have to pay attention to things like that. In our neighborhood, we had a lady who was trying to run a business out of her home. She did like a exercise thing where a bunch of people would show up every early morning and the whole street would be packed with cars, and she would exercise in the yard with like 20 people, and they would live stream it, and she made money that way. That's how she did her living. So someone in the HOA said, hey, you can't run a business out of your home. You're blocking traffic. You're making it hard for anyone to go by at the school. The buses could hardly get by. It made it very difficult for everybody. So that was stopped. That's part of something she should have looked into before she bought that home if she wanted to run a business out of her home. Things like that can happen. So you have to pay attention to whatever your client's looking to do. Make sure they check out the HOA. Now, the section A2 is if the buyer is going to get the documents instead of the seller. And then section 3 is the buyer's already got them and you don't need to receive any more updated. And we got a certificate. We know what we're doing. We're good. Usually it's going to be 1. And this is the seller paying for the HOA docs. Okay. Or so many days the seller is going to obtain and pay for them. Now down here, see the buyer does not require, or the buyer could say, I don't care. I don't want the HOA. So again, A1, seller pays. A2, buyer pays. A3, buyer already have them and they're good to go. A4, buyer doesn't care. They don't want the information. But if you're in an HOA, you have to be in the HOA. They have no choice. So you have to do that. So it's usually going to be 1. Material changes. If anything changes in the subdivision information, it's important before closing, the seller needs to tell the buyer. And again, if they tell them, that gives them another way to get out of the contract. And then the earnest money will be refunded. So hopefully nothing changes. If a new management company takes over or any crazy changes, they have to let people know. Fees and deposits. This is, so buyers will pay any fees, association deposits, reserves with a transfer of the property not to exceed this amount. And seller shall pay for any excess. Okay, this does not apply to regular periodic maintenance, assessments or dues, including prepaid items that are prorated in paragraph 13, and costs and fees provided by paragraph A and D, right here, like authorization down here. If this paragraph conflicts with any other location, this paragraph will control. So what they added this last sentence in the new contract, which is interesting. So they're saying if this conflicts with anything else in the subdivision, this paragraph, paragraph C, is very important. The buyer's paying this amount, the seller's paying the rest. And this is where it gets kind of tricky these days. Almost every HOA now, especially in the San Antonio, South Texas area, is adding things like a beautification fee, extra like a home, I don't know, some crazy name. They call them all kinds of stuff. Beautification is the main one they're doing now. And that can be $800 to $1,500 extra on top of the transfer fees. So instead of $150, which would be normal $250 transfer, buyer pays $150, seller pays $100. Everyone's happy. You split it pretty much 50-50. They're doing this where it's going to cost $800 to $1,000, or sometimes even $1,500 to do a transfer of the HOA stuff. Now, this beautification fees, does that include? That is not a regular periodic maintenance fee. It's a one-time fee. Now, again, I'm not a lawyer, so you'd want to reach out to your lawyers. Or do you know, is it an assessment? No. So it doesn't really fit in here, but it kind of fits in there. So that's a confusion that a lot of people are having right now, and they're trying to fight it, saying you're charging me this extra maintenance, but it's not a maintenance fee. It's a beautification fee. And if you ask them, what do they say? It's to keep the neighborhood beautiful. So that would be considered a maintenance fee, but it's not regular periodic maintenance fees. So they try to get away with that. It's been very confusing for a lot of agents, and even for myself when I try to explain it. I'm like, this is crazy. So talk to your lawyers if you have a question. But usually what's happening is the buyer's paying this much. If it's $2,000, their seller's going to pay the rest. That can take a big chunk out of their proceeds. So please pay attention to that. You'll get some very angry people otherwise. Now, authorization, again, you're going to give the title company, the buyer, et cetera. They're going to, so any updated request by the buyer, the title company, broker of the sale, buyer does not require the subdivision or an updated so if buyer, does not require the subdivision information or an updated resale certificate, the title company requires information such as dues, et cetera, then who's going to pay? The seller usually pays the cost. Now, notice to buyer regarding repairs. You have, if the HOA has to do any repairs to certain places on the property, some HOAs do that. They do like, I don't know, like the fence line. If it's a lot of fences on the main street, the HOA is in charge of that. Our HOA, we have a gate, so the gate's always being hit by people trying to sneak in, and then that's repairs. They put up some cameras that make people pay for that themselves now, and then like that. So make sure you don't sign your contract and be happy until you're satisfied that the HOA is going to make those repairs. So again, this is how many days. Now I have 15 days, a good conversation to think about that if it's a 10-day option. There's no way you're going to get the HOA docs, or I shouldn't say no way. It's rare if you order the HOA docs and they come back within 5 days in some of the bigger HOAs. Some of the smaller ones, you'll be fine. So I like to put 21 days here if I'm in the listing side. On the buyer side, I'll put 15. And then this section right here, my buyer's paying 150, seller pays the rest. So as listing agents, you got to know what your transfer fees are. You got to call the HOA. You need to find out. So if there's a beautification, any other fee like that they're going to throw in there, you need to know so your seller doesn't get hit with that, because they're not going to be happy. So make sure you take care of all that. And I'll talk to you in the next one. Hope this helped. If you haven't liked and subscribed, join our family.